Testing 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2, 3.
Testing 1, 2.
Okay. We're good. That's what I wanted to hear. Okay, everybody, I am live a few minutes early here because I want to talk about a couple other things before we get started with this live stream. Boy, we've got some special guests on tonight that's going to join my crew, and we'll talk about past lives and two very fascinating books I want to get some details on, and we're going to learn about all this together. Here in about 10 minutes, we'll get started with that. I just played, I can't talk, a little clip. The wishing machine, and I don't know if you're familiar with radionics or not, but you can go to my website. This is a organ pyramid, and I've got a lot of information about this on my website. Let me play this clip again, and there we go. This is fascinating stuff, and I have my own personal experience with this. So this is why I want to make sure everybody learns about this. You can go to my website and learn a lot more. All right, sorry about that. This is kind of the prequel to the show. What? All right. And I'm waiting on my people to show up here in a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and open up this page. And I'm going to share and talk about this for just a moment while we're waiting on our people to show up for the 7 o'clock show. All right, the website is drkelsey.wishmaker.com. And just a couple of reviews that was written. And this girl, who calls herself Christian Girl Tracy 4, has left reviews more than one place, and she's very, very happy with her wishing machine. She wrote, absolutely speechless. It feels like the Twilight Zone. The machine is a portal into the supernatural. I wish that I could tell you everything, but I must keep it to myself. I am learning so much about myself, things that I never imagined. This is amazing. This is an amazing experience. I still don't understand it. God is going to richly bless you, Dr. Kelsey. I'll never, ever forget you. Thank you, Christian Girl Tracy 4. She came back and she wrote, hi, Dr. Kelsey. I love you so much. Whatever your intention is, the machine magnifies it by 1,000 times. I have never experienced anything like this in my life. It is a supernatural experience. This is so amazing. I'm speechless. Words cannot express how thankful I am to you. God led me to you so that you would create this magical machine for me. No one knows about my machine but my sister, but I keep my intentions to myself. No one knows but me. The machine sends my subconscious thoughts to the universe. The subconscious mind is the prover. Thank you so much. I love you. And then this wonderful lady, Tracy. No, this wasn't Tracy. This is anonymous in Georgia. And this I've had several telephone conversations with this person. Screw it, I'm done. I had my wish machine for about 3 weeks. I was a bit frustrated because I did not understand why my original wish was not manifesting. My seasonal allergies were acting up, and I was just not in a good mood. I had errands to run, and nothing had been working right for the entire morning. I unplugged the machine. I was at my wit's end. Within, I lost my place. With a flourish, I took off the original wish off the machine. I said in a loud voice, screw it, I'm done. I threw down a $20 bill on the input plate and left the house to run my errands. But it turned out that I ended up winning $420 in the Georgia lottery online, plus an additional $120 that day. The first 100 came within an hour of my statement of screw it, I'm done. The rest of the money manifested within 4 additional hours. I guess you could say that this is not bad for receiving over $500 within 5 hours. The wishing machine not only paid for itself, but I made a profit. Anonymous in Georgia. Excellent, beautiful craftsmanship. I love the wishing machine. And then from Germany. And this goes on and on, people. They're very happy, very satisfied with the wishing machine. So I wanted to just take a moment and share my website with you. And you want to read up on that. And that is, let me go ahead and close this out. We got everybody here already. And I'm just kind of talking a little bit early here. I'm going to go ahead and bring Kevin on with me. Here is my cohort, Kevin Kane. How you doing, Kevin?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Not bad for an old man. You ready for all this rain tomorrow?
Yeah, I guess so. We'll see.
We've got the remnants of Hurricane Zeta headed our way through central Alabama, I guess starting tonight through tomorrow sometime. So we're going to have plenty of rain. We have tonight, this is going to be a fascinating show. This couple is just past lives. This is something, I'm no expert on this subject, but I have read about it. My whole background has been digging into different belief systems, different philosophies. Of course, like you, Kevin, I was brought up in a very fundamentalist Christian environment, but I had a lot of questions, and I sought to really broaden my horizon and see what else there was out there, because the mainstream Christianity is just one way to view things, and I wanted to get it right. I didn't want to just think that just because my parents or culture taught me a certain way, that was the only way to believe, or that there was nothing else out there. And so ultimately I worked on my PhD in theology. So I think we're just a couple of minutes ahead of time, but I'm excited. I'm going to add you guys on here. We got Dave and Carla, and based on what you guys have shared with me, you both have retired from a medical practice.
That's
Carla,
true.
yeah.
Yay, yes.
Yes, we like that.
And Kevin already had a conversation on the phone, and these people, even though they take what they do very seriously, they're kind of like me. They love to laugh and enjoy life. Have I misread you?
Nope.
Not in the least bit, Kelsey.
You have us pegged.
My mother stayed active to the moment she died, and she was laughing up to the last moment. So I figured that's the way I want to go out.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I try to keep Kevin laughing a lot, but sometimes he's a hard nut to crack,
Come on,
No,
Kevin.
I laugh circles around you. You're the shiny head.
we pick on each other a lot, so that means we like each other, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I guess so.
Well, so you now are vice president of let's see, medical affairs of a hospital.
That's correct. It's a great part-time job.
Great part-time job.
Yeah,
Well, that's good.
yeah. So I've reached 61, had heart surgery about a year ago, and went to just doing the vice president's job, and it's perfect.
Well, great. So you and Carla met because she worked for you in your office,
That's actually the case. Yes.
and now, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I'm assuming that you still are teaching meditation.
Yes, we still do. At some
Okay.
local places, local universities, the senior center here. Anybody else that is interested.
Well, I'll tell you what, meditation to me is very important. You can call it quiet time or just whatever. And when I was very much younger and I had hair on my head, I used to have, well, now my head's perfect, so it don't need to be covered anymore, right?
Mhm.
That's right.
More face to kiss.
That's it. And you know, when I first started shaving it, there would be strange women come up to me in a restaurant and kiss my head for good luck. So I kept shaving it. Anyway, so we're going to get into, you've written 2 books on this subject. Somewhere along the line, I feel it's safe to assume that you guys connected on this past live.
That's correct. We'll explain it as we go.
That's it. I don't want to rush ahead of myself, but I'm so excited to learn more detail. I have not had the opportunity to read your books. I'm going to, but so I'm going to be learning along with everybody that's listening to us. Okay.
Great.
Sounds great.
So what kind of a physician were you?
I was a foot doctor, so a podiatrist. I was actually, I was a nurse for 10 years, went back to medical school and became a podiatrist.
Okay. And you're now retired from that end of it.
And that means Carla gets to retire. And so
Yay!
So you just closed your office, your practice down.
Mhm.
we did.
Okay. And then you drug her along and said, we got another life to live.
Absolutely.
Mhm. And do we?
I'm sorry, Carla?
I said, and do we?
Oh, well, you're probably with all this maybe even more active than you were before you retired.
I wouldn't have time to work now.
There you go.
Yep, that's true.
Well, that's kind of like me. I kind of retired young. I'd lost all my family by the time I turned 50.
Hmm.
I took some time off, but I got bored real quick. And I'm the type of fellow that if I don't stay busy, I'm going to get in trouble. So
Yes.
I can
But
understand it.
I stay real busy now. Plus, I'm a full-time caregiver on top of that. And
Oh.
as I was giving an introduction to this, I was brought up in the South, very fundamentalist, very right-wing fundamentalist Christianity, if you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
And I got in a lot of trouble as a kid because my dad was a pastor and I asked too many questions that they couldn't answer.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound familiar?
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Not so much Dave, but me.
But you, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Carla asks all the questions. Both of us were actually raised Catholic, and they didn't answer many of the questions either.
Well, my Baptist friends does not like to hear it, but I always remind them that their roots are in Catholicism. So
We can
So to get away from that, do our own thing.
we could talk about religion history. That's sort of in the second book, but
okay,
we'll get
well,
there.
we're gonna get into the past life because I think that's the big thing everybody's interested in. And
Yeah.
I'm going to bring on our third partner here, if she'll let me. And this is Catherine Marie.
Hello, Catherine Marie.
Hi, Catherine.
So you guys are surrounded tonight with all of us, and so why don't we just get started on the subject at hand? We'll get a little background about you guys. So, if you don't mind, I want to find out how did the conversation start? What led you to this past life? I mean, you're looking at people's feet and healing people's feet and that sort of thing. And just what happened is all of a sudden you and Carla look at each other and said, I remember 2 centuries ago when I was so-and-so.
No, it wasn't like that. But
Okay.
in 2014, we had implemented electronic medical records. And, that was put upon us. We did not have a choice. The government said, you need to do this. Everybody needs to be on board. So, we're not young people. We were normally used to charts with paper and pen, not computerized. I mean, we had some computer, but not, everything wasn't computer. So it was quite stressful. And Dave was working extremely long hours, just trying to get, for instance, a new patient note went from being maybe 1 page to 6 to 10 pages. It was ridiculous. He was working very long hours before he came to the office and after. And Dave is normally like Yogi Bear or Fred Flintstone. A lot of fun, but he wasn't. He was just, quite frankly, a crab. And
I can't believe it.
I can. I lived it. So one day I was reading an AARP magazine about meditation and the benefits. And I had meditated years before, but of course that Catholic upbringing scared the crap out of me and said, you could conjure something up if you meditate. So I stopped. But then when I read this article in AARP, I thought, you know what, let's give it a shot. So I went into Dave and I said, you're just not functioning. We need to do something. So I can call a counselor or let's try to meditate. What do you think? And Dave said, all right, let's try to meditate. So there were 2 other girls in the office that worked with us, and we decided that as an office, we would meditate about 30 minutes before the patient started. Well, that meant getting there about 7:30. And so we did that the first day, and we all had our own version of what happened, but basically we couldn't turn our minds off. We had calming music playing, but your mind is asking, did I turn the iron off? What am I making for dinner? And it's really hard to shut things down, but we did it. On the second day, we all said, oh, I saw purple colors. My sister, who also worked in the office, saw a multitude of colors. The other young girl that worked in the office saw pink, and Dave saw white. And then on the third day, what happened, Dave?
Well, I thought meditation was wonderful because we got to shut off the computers for 30 minutes. We all relaxed. I jumped up, ran down the hall, feeling better, ready to start seeing patients. But on the third day, while I was meditating, I suddenly saw a woman. And the woman reminded me of Carla from a side view. She kind of had the same eyelashes. And she kept showing me a shoe, and she was smiling and laughing. And I thought, well, okay, I'm a doctor and I've lost my mind. But I ran in right before I went to see the patients and I said, Carla, I think I saw your mother and was talking to her.
Wow.
And she said, well, what do you mean you saw my mother? Why didn't my mother come and talk to me? And I said, well, she showed me a shoe, and she brought up shoes on her computer screen. And I walked over and there were 60 shoes on her screen, and I pointed at a shoe and I said, it's this shoe. And Carla said,
Well, my mother had been a ballroom dancer, and she wore the same type of shoe for her entire life. And she didn't wear this open-toed sandal just to dance. She wore it if she was dressing up or for church. They were comfortable. And the chance that Dave would pick that shoe out, it was just, one of those moments. And my sister and I looked at each other like, oh, how did you get that? So then Dave went further.
and I just kept meditating. We kept meditating. The next day, I had another woman appear to me, and she told me her name was Isabella. And Isabella said, I have been with you for 6,000 years.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm pretty sure I'm off the deep end, but I keep meditating.
And the same woman for 6,000 years, that would send you off the deep end, right?
It probably would. But I was trying to share with these guys in the office everything that was happening, and I started having these little visions of things, and I saw a Mayan temple. I saw a row of stuffed squirrels, which was really strange. I saw hieroglyphics, little glimpses of a life. I now know it was a life at the Civil War time. And then there was a day when I was meditating actually at home, and suddenly I had this vision. As I'm meditating, I feel this thump in my chest. I get thrown backwards. I hit the table next to my bed, knocked over the stand, and I realize I'm laying in an alley, bleeding to death. And I look over, and there's Carla standing there. And I wonder, what is this all about? She's much younger. She's dressed like a flapper, but I know it's her. She kind of looks like her in the eyes. She's got these steel blue eyes. And I'm literally amazed. And I don't even know what to think about it. The next day, I have another memory while I'm meditating with them. And I have this memory of running on a beach as a 3-year-old. And I have to tell you the story because my father went to graduate school when I was 3 years old in Boston. Carla and her sister were from Boston when they were very young. But while I'm running on this beach, this little girl runs over, pushes me down, sits on my chest, gives me a kiss right on the forehead. She jumps up, puts both hands on her hips, and she says, "Quit bothering my family." The very next thing I hear while I'm having this memory is, "Carla, that's not how little girls act." So she has on this little 2-piece blue ruffled bathing suit.
Be careful.
With a little pot belly hanging over.
I knew he was going to say that.
And when I tell her this story, and Paula the story, they go, "When were you in Boston?" I said, "Well, when I was 3. And Carla looks at me and says, "It was me." So now I've had this memory that Carla has confirmed about being 3 years old in this life, and we met each other.
I was much older, though. I was 4.
Yeah. Tell your part of that story.
Well, it was unbelievable that he had brought that story up. I remembered that and always will, and I didn't need meditation to remember it because I was from the good Catholic family, 6 girls. I was the youngest. My parents were always splitting up and getting back together because, they weren't supposed to divorce. But at that particular moment in time during their marriage, they had gotten back together and had got 2 cabs to take us down to Revere Beach because they didn't own a car. We weren't well off. When we got there, for whatever reason, I did not have a bathing suit. So I don't know if it's because someone forgot it. I normally inherited one from one of my older sisters, but I didn't have it. Perhaps I outgrew it with that pot belly. I don't know. But we went across the street, and all of us, and
I got very cute.
Yeah, now you say that. We went across the street, and I got my first brand new 2-piece blue ruffled bathing suit. So I remember that forever because not only was that something that didn't happen, I didn't get new clothes. I wore my sister's. My family was together, all of us, and that rarely happened. My parents were splitting up and getting back together since I was 18 months old, probably before that. So it was etched in my mind.
And so, if this makes any sense, I'm having this memory about being in an alley and being shot, and Carla looks like a flapper and dressed in 1920s outfit. And then I have a memory of us being together in this life that we didn't know. You know, we're 55 years old and we're having a memory of when we met when we were 3 and 4. And I kept having more memories of this life in the 1920s. And so I started telling Carla, you know, you'll probably think I'm crazy, but I saw you in this dream. We met at a wedding. There was some mobster named Angelo involved who was getting married. Your name was Ruby Donaldson. It's in Chicago's Little Italy. And then Carla had a day off and she went out searching for information.
I actually went to Ancestry.com and I found a Ruby Donaldson born in Bullock, Georgia, a child of 11, one of 11 children, born to James and Anna Donaldson. I had pictures of my parents. There was their wedding certificate and some of the birth certificates of the children. And then I went further to look up articles on gangsters in Chicago during the 1920s and came up with the name of Angelo Genna. I never heard of Angelo Genna, but apparently Angelo Genna had been the head mobster before Capone. And I found another article that corroborated the wedding, January the 10th, 1925, to Lucille Spinola. And also there was a picture of their wedding cake because it was 10 feet tall. It showed people standing next to this cake. It towered over them and it served over 3,000 mobsters. So I called Dave and said, you're not going to believe what I found. So you are not crazy. These names are not made up. I found this and this and this and this.
And so
let me clarify as we go along a couple of questions just to make this backstory more solid. Did you not meet each other in the present until she started working for you at your practice? You didn't have any other background?
No.
Correct. After we saw each other at 3 and 4, we didn't see each other again for 36 years.
Okay. And all this that you were seeing, and it's okay to call you Dave? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Took place during these meditation sessions at your office in the morning.
Correct.
So you were lucid. It wasn't like you were dreaming. You were very
wide awake.
Wide awake. And so you saw these things, and I did you start sharing them right away, or did you wait till you saw her and said, I think I saw you?
I started sharing when I saw her mother. Then I started sharing other things. Then Isabella started talking. And so I started trying to share that because I thought, if I'm losing my mind, at least somebody else will know. And everybody started being interested in everything I was telling them about. And then we learned about Ruby Donaldson, and my name was J.J. Wright. And so I started to share that.
And we started to journal everything, write everything down, even if it didn't make sense.
Yes. So if I saw a Mayan temple, we wrote it down. If I saw strange lights, we wrote it down. And we started journaling till we had piles and piles of journals, piles and piles of past lives.
So this was, I guess, 5 days a week. Your office, your whole crew was meditating together?
No. After the third day, the other two girls said, we don't want to get here at 7:30. You know, they had responsibilities, but they were meditating at home, religiously.
So the question I've got is, Dave is having some profound insights. I don't know what you call them, insights.
Insights.
Was anybody else sharing anything that they were having in this process?
Yes, Paula and I, my sister, we were getting faces and pictures of different things and colors and lights, but we weren't speaking to anyone in the spiritual world like Dave was able to do.
So the profound thing I'm hearing is that you and Dave connected in a previous time before you were born.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's what makes your story more unique and interesting.
Yeah, because there was actually a day I came in and started telling her more of the story. And I was telling her about walking along the coast in Chicago, the conversation we were having
With
and
Ruby.
with Ruby, yes. JJ and Ruby were talking, and I'm telling her the conversation. And as I'm telling her the conversation, Carla starts finishing the sentences and has the same memory and already knows what Ruby's going to say. And when that happened, we said, okay, something here is
Freaky.
definitely freaky, definitely profound. And then we kept going through and finding these little bits of information, putting them together. And pretty soon we had found 42 lives that I had, 34 lives that Carla had, and we had 29 of them together.
Wow. Okay, so prior to this experience, prior to your meditation, Dave, you were Catholic.
Correct.
And what were you, Carla?
Raised Catholic, and then when my mother divorced my father finally, she became Mormon. God help me. And then, as a married person, I went with my two stepdaughters to the Methodist Church. So I did not stop searching. I continued my search. I had questions. I had ongoing questions, and I wanted answers.
So you were more open-minded than Dave at this point.
Absolutely.
Yes, I thought I was going crazy.
Okay, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting your story. I want you to continue, but I just certain things I want to learn as you go, if you don't mind. Yeah.
No, keep asking.
Absolutely. Any questions, we're ready.
Yeah,
So,
because that was just, it's like, well, how long, Carla, had you worked with Dave as in his office?
Well, I started working for him in 1998, and this didn't happen until 2014. And we were really good friends by that point. I mean, I had stood up for him at his wedding, went to Jamaica when he married his second wife. We had gone through, death of his father together, and, just all the stuff that people go through in life. We had gone through all of that together.
So you were great friends to begin with.
Very much
absolutely. Absolutely.
He was like the brother I never had.
So Dave, when you went into this meditation experience, as a Catholic, I'd find it difficult to think that you were thinking about past lives.
Absolutely was not.
That wouldn't be in your vocabulary.
No,
if you were a practicing Catholic.
Correct. I thought maybe there was something spiritual going on. Maybe there is some way to connect with people who had passed over. Certainly I'd heard of mediums and people who did that. Certainly I had no idea, because I was taught you got one chance, you don't get it right, you go to hell, those kind of things. Yeah. And this was completely different to me. Now you have to understand that every day Isabella, who is my spirit guide, would talk to me. So I'm hearing a voice in my head. Again, people will say, there's a little something strange there.
Where's the psychiatrist?
Yeah, that's what I thought. However, the more I meditated, the easier this gets. And so she started giving us lessons. And we had lessons like, there is no hell. This was part of God's plan from the very beginning. You would get chance after chance. You would reincarnate until you actually balance your karma or fix your problems that you're having, learn all the lessons, and then you get to return home. That there is a purpose to this, that if there is a loving God, you wouldn't get one chance. If a God knows everything, omnipresent and all of those issues, why would God say, you get one chance, I created you this way, but if you don't do what you're supposed to, you go to hell? God already knew you'd fail. Wouldn't he give you a chance after chance like any other loving parent?
Yeah. Okay. Now, with Carla's got at least a little bit of background with Mormonism.
Correct.
How studied were you in that faith?
Well, they rather force it down your throat. And my mother, whatever she did it, she jumped in. So as a Catholic, she was a great Catholic until they said you can't take the sacrament because you're divorced. And, unfortunately, those cute little 18-year-old Mormon boys show up on your doorstep because they're doing what they think is right. But it seems like they appeal to those who are really in need, and my mother was, because she felt like the church had let her down. And they just started to talk to her, and she felt like she was included because, Mormons have a president of the church, but then the parishioners all take turns having a job and running each one of the individual branches. So it's more like you participate.
Right.
You are a part of the church. So as soon as I was 18, that's it. I never walked through the door again, because it was to me, I'm sorry, it's very cultish. And
there's no doubt. They and Jehovah's Witnesses are almost brother and sister.
yeah, I mean, you just, first of all, you don't show up on my door and tell me. I actually had one Mormon show up on my door when I was about 22 and asked me to sign excommunication papers. And I said, God does not excommunicate people, so get off of my porch.
Mm-hmm.
And he would not. He said, you have to sign these. And I went in and I called the police and I said, if you cannot get this man off of my porch, I will get my gun out. And the police are there in a couple seconds.
Well,
so that was the end.
Yeah. I'm not trying to turn this into that heavy a religious conversation, but because of my studies, the interesting thing about where we're going with the past lives is there is a minor little touch of Mormonism in your, and that is Mormons believe that you had a heavenly existence before you came to earth and took on this body and that sort of thing. It's kind of like a reincarnation, if you will, a previous life. Not to the level you're talking about, but just kind of tinges a little bit there.
Yeah, and part of our lessons have been that we have a pre-existence in heaven, so that might be a little bit like some of the Mormons will teach.
Yeah, they believe that you've got this veil of forgetfulness on you, that you can't really remember that this took place in heaven, but you've got to come to earth, and like the Catholics, you've got to do these sacraments in the church, and according to what you get done on earth is according to what level of heaven you'll end up in.
The terrestrial, celestial, whatever you call it.
One of them you get to see the Holy Ghost. The other one you get to see the Holy Ghost all the time, and Jesus will come and visit you, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, I don't remember ever seeing Jesus show up at a door and say, "Since you don't believe in me anymore, can you sign this excommunication paper?"
Yeah.
No.
Kevin is a very I'll put it this way, he's the nicest Christian you'll ever meet. So
well, he said love your neighbor as you do yourself. I mean, that's not very loving to excommunicate. What was that word?
Excommunicate. You're right.
The Catholics do that, but they don't really practice it.
Is that word even in the Bible? I don't even remember seeing that word.
Well, they get that from the Bible that says to disassociate yourself with, somebody that basically, I guess the word would be apostate.
Yeah, there's the Book of Mormon that kind of.
Yeah.
But anyway, so again, kind of setting the background of where you guys are going. So you're now in your meditation state, and Carla's going and doing this research, and you're learning about all these names that you have meditated about, and she's finding them in secular records, if you will, that backs up your story.
Mm-hmm.
At least for a couple of the lives we found evidence of them existing.
And this Isabella is your spirit guide.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So I assume you got very close to Isabella.
Very close and still close. Every day there's time I spend with Isabella. It's very comforting, and by Isabella's own words, she says, none of us are ever alone. We all have a spirit guide. We all have angels with us that are here to help and guide us on our path they're that, maybe you want to call it conscious, that's there, asking you, should you really steal that candy bar? Those kind of things that some of us don't know and don't try to communicate with. But if you meditate enough, some of those things can start to come through.
You know why the church doesn't like you to meditate too much, don't you?
We've actually done a lot of research, but if we can find a direct link to God that doesn't require the church, then the church no longer wants us to go that way.
Molinism.
Molinism or Aminism was a form of meditation that they did in Spain and France in the 1600s, and the popes outlawed it.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want you to learn a direct communication with God, Creator.
One of my favorite sayings is your mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But now, thanks for answering those questions, but please continue your story. I think we're in Chicago at this point.
So, again, I keep telling Carla the stories of Chicago. It becomes where we realize that Ruby and JJ had an emotional relationship that happened over a couple weekends. We find out that the mobster, Angelo Jenna, is very upset that I'm having any kind of relationship with his flapper, Ruby Donaldson, and I get shot. And
you're in the alley bleeding.
And I'm in the alley bleeding. And actually, it's a interesting experience there because I actually remember that death. I remember golden wings and a little black hand reach down and take mine and pull me up. And I was shooting through time, space, eternity, up that white light kind of tunnel that people talk about in NDE experiences. And then we went through another life. And when I died, I got the same experience. And then we found more lives, and we started to find other people we knew in those lives also. And Isabella would explain to us that we actually do travel in family groups, soul groups. We call them family mates in the book, because those people that are close to you continue to come back to you for a couple different reasons. They either come to help you again in your next incarnation, trying to help you through your lessons, or they actually become karmic mates, which means they're there to test you, and they may actually be a roadblock in your growth that you have to overcome. And so we keep meeting those people, but we found Carla's sister. We actually found Carla's past husband, who was actually the gangster Angelo Jenna, which was really exciting to find out.
Yeah, so the relationship we had in Chicago was not a pleasant one, and then I turned around and remarried him in this life.
Okay.
How smart was that? Apparently there was karma.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm full of questions.
Yes.
Please ask. Please ask.
These experiences, you say you're finding these people.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this through this meditation experience. That's where it stems from. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you ever reach a point to where this is coming to you when you're just going through your day?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there became times when I would start to explain what I was seeing, and I could literally become that person.
Wow.
Carla would ask the questions and I would answer them, and they would start coming out with an English accent. There's a life where I'm a little boy who stutters, and I start to stutter during that. There's been times, now most of the time it seems to translate into English, but every once in a while there are words that don't translate, and I hear them. I've heard them in Hebrew, I've heard them in German, or in a different language, and then we have to go look the word up, and it doesn't translate very well. We've had many lessons from Isabella on what the purpose of all these lessons are, and it finally comes down to the 5 simple rules. which is live without conceit, don't harbor jealousy, don't be selfish, always be forgiving and always love, and that really God is love. Anything else that doesn't seem to be love is not really from God. And so if you make all of your life choices, not being conceited, not being selfish, missing one of the words, being forgiving and always loving, then you actually don't develop any karma and you can actually learn all your lessons. We've also found that we return in lots of different ways in different lives so that you'll experience the both sides of almost every issue. We found that a life where we're Viking and we're fighting the Scottish. We found a life where English fighting the Scottish. We found a life where we're Scottish fighting the English. And what Isabella says, in all of these issues, you're fighting on the opposite side because you're literally fighting yourself. And then we found lives where we're Black, where we're white, where we're Asian, so that we'll know what it feels like to live in somebody else's skin, because part of the lesson is compassion.
So that if you experience that, that's beyond compassion. That would put you in a situation of having empathy.
Empathy, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So you understand, and we've been kings and queens, we've been slave owners.
We've been slaves.
We've been slaves. I've been flogged as a slave in a couple of these lives. So you start to realize what other people are going through. And so the empathy and compassion means that you can actually learn to love those that are different than yourselves. And then you really realize pretty soon you're not different than anybody. Nobody's special. We're all special. We're all equal. And that's really part of the lesson of this.
So, I'm sorry, Carla, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that in our book, The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth, we actually tell 21 of our past life stories. And at the end of each one of those lives, we tell what we did wrong. We relate it to whether we were jealous, conceited, selfish, unforgiving, so that the reader understands, okay, after that one, they're certainly coming back, just to show that we're like everybody else.
So when you are discovering these past lives and past experiences, and you in that past life are interacting with other people like Carla in a past life, where you bumped into each other and you've got these shared lives back there, is it like you're talking to ghosts? I mean, is it like
it's not like talking to ghosts. Now it's literally like watching the movie or becoming part of it. They look like they do when I'm having the memory, and they don't look exactly like they do in this life. I'd say if you look at their eyes, you could feel it. We usually say something like, the eyes are the window to the soul, because you can start to realize it's the same person in this life. It's not always easy because their mannerisms are there. A lot of things are much similar. Carla's, as Ruby Donaldson is 21 years old and a hot blonde flapper.
Yeah, much younger.
Now you may still be hot and blonde, but you're no longer young. You're no longer young.
Hey.
So
you got to be very careful, Dave.
Yeah, I gotta be careful. That's true. I said still blonde and hot, so I mean.
Yeah, anyway. But you needed to just leave it there. Didn't go in.
Better leave it there.
Better leave it there.
There's a reason I'm bald, Dave.
Okay. Anyway, so we became more and more curious. And so we actually, after about 3 years of doing this, we actually went for past life regression training with Dr. Brian Weiss.
Yes.
Because we know other people have had these experiences, and we wanted to see if we could figure out how this works.
So you had all this journey before you went through the regression part.
Absolutely.
You had already dug up a whole lot of stuff. You probably, it sounds like you had enough material for your first book already.
The book was already in the works when we.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes, it was.
And then
It
we
was nearly
decided,
done.
if it worked this good just from our novice experience, how much better would it work if I went to a experienced person for training? Is that kind of?
That's
Well,
absolutely.
Except it wasn't necessary. I could actually just talk to Dave, and I guess it would be like I was the hypnotist, and actually take him into one of those lives. He can do it himself. So it wasn't.
So, Carla, Dave is having all these experiences. Are you having any at all? Or are you just having to go to the library and do research and go to?
No, I have my own experiences. I actually, and my sister as well, I get visions of things, and I normally draw what I see. And then I go to Dave and I say, what is this from? And he can say, oh, well, that was that life. This was blah, 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 blah. So he's really tuned in. He's very gifted, I guess the word is.
Do you credit Isabella for a lot of your gift that you're dealing with here?
Dave does.
I do. It's a gift. It's a gift. Carla has her own spirit guide. Her name is Elizabeth. And that's really where part of the title in the book with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth is. We've had experiences with all four of those entities. And as we have those experiences, we figured they needed part of the credit on the book.
So now you're retired. Do you still meditate daily?
Every day.
That's become part of your life.
It's part of my life. And after, I'll even share this part of this story, because after I was stressed and all those things and I started to meditate, things started to literally change, some because of this experience and some of the experiences that were supposed to be our better self and those kind of things. But we've actually done some research on meditation, and it actually does lower your blood pressure. It decreases cortisol. And after I started to meditate, over the next year, I made a goal, and that was to lose 2 pounds a week. And at the end of 52 weeks, I lost 104 pounds.
Well, I never completed where I was going earlier, because when I was young, late teens and early 20s, I had a stomach issue. I would get horrible gas. I would double over and pass out on the toilet from pain. And I think they got a word for that now, but I never even went to the doctor. I taught myself to meditate and never had any more issues.
Absolutely.
And that's probably related to some past issue that you had. Past karma.
Yeah, I know, but see, I know the skeletons in this life. I don't want to know when
Yeah. I could see where that would be a concern. And the reality is it is this life that matters. You can't change any of the past lives that you've already had.
But from what I'm hearing from your experiences and the way Carla described it, you are learning lessons from each of those lives.
Yes.
Each and every life.
And the wonderful thing that affects everybody you come in contact with is you are you're building more and more ability to be empathetic with everybody you come in contact with.
Correct.
Yes, for sure.
And I think that's one of the most wonderful things I'm hearing here, because I think we overuse the word compassion. It's like I hear thoughts and prayers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes.
But I think what's more important is if you can feel somebody else's pain or what they're going through, it makes your reaction and understanding, it enhances it to such a level, that compassion doesn't get to.
And Kelsey, there's even 3 stories in the book, changing names and etc., where I talk about 3 different patients of mine, because I certainly didn't share this with my patients while I was practicing.
You didn't want to lose the patient.
Didn't want to lose all the patients. However, as I was going through this experience, not only did I lose weight and did it change who I was, it made me a lot more open to discuss anything that anybody wanted to discuss during any one of their appointments. And so I had a patient who was actually a Lutheran minister who was a diabetic who had a very bad foot infection. And we worked through that, and his wound wouldn't heal, until we started dealing with his personal life issues, and then his wound healed. Then I had a patient who was actually Muslim who had another foot wound, and it wouldn't heal until we started discussing that his whole life goal was to go back and do his trip to Mecca. And I said, let's plan on your trip to Mecca. And he said, well, how will I do this with my foot that won't heal? I said, let's just start planning your trip to Mecca. If it's that important to you, let's see what happens. So he planned his trip. We worked on special shoes for him to do his walk in his pilgrimage. We got his wound to heal, and he went back and traveled to Mecca and did his visit. I actually had, since this might be closer to your training, a Baptist minister who was overweight and blood sugars were out of control. I started to have him meditate, start to think about being his best self. We started talking about some shared patient I had and a patient or a
Resident.
resident at one of the nursing homes that he knew. And he got really excited about sharing stuff with this 104-year-old that was at the nursing home that he knew. And suddenly he started to lose weight and his blood sugar went back down. So if you get people to engage in their own spirituality, even if it's not on the same path you are, they will start to heal.
So even though you have found a different spiritual path than your Catholicism and so forth, you're not standing in judgment of other people's paths.
Absolutely not. In fact, even from Isabella, she says there's some truth in every religion. There is, and most of them are based on love thy neighbor as thyself. And so being good to people and being understanding of what their struggles are will help them. It's the same, and if you follow the 5 simple rules, if you're not conceited or jealous or selfish, you're forgiving and you're loving, people start to realize it. They start to change. It's part of that ripple effect. It's part of the change that this world has to go through.
So we, okay, Carla, this seems almost like it's Dave's story,
Okay.
but you are part of his story.
Well, exactly, because for over 6,000 years, our very first life was together. We had 12 kids, so I guess you could say it was romantic. But after that, no, we were actually, well, it was probably before all of that, but it was, we were actually born outside the Mount of Olives. That was our first life.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the lives we've had since then, I've been his mother a couple of times. That explains the nagging, Dave. I've been his neighbor. I've been his sister. You know, but for some reason, God thinks we can work well together enough to write these books and get the word out.
They wrote a country song about you, Carla.
Did they?
It was something about I am my own grandfather.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I'm my own grandpa. That one. Yes.
And we have, Kelsey, found things like that where you're literally following a little bit in family lines and
Bloodlines.
in bloodlines, group lines. All of this is true in our experience.
But
and
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, and because, again, I was a doctor, so I try to find everything else out that I can. So I started doing as much research as I could, and we did the past life regression training. I've read as much experience on near-death experiences that I can. We started looking back at reincarnation research, and there's actually a lot of research out there. books written by Ian Stevenson, Jim Matlock, since the 1960s. They have about 2,400 cases that they considered as verified when the researchers were looking. These stories are really interesting to read. There's a story in India where a little boy is 3 years old and he looks at his father and says, "Where's my wife?"
Mm-hmm.
And then the little boy says, "She lives in Punjabi in a blue house on the corner." And so they take the little boy and they drive to Punjabi, India. And he knocks on this door of this blue house, and a woman answers the door and he says, "Hi, Jean, you are my wife." Well, she's 48 and he's 3. And he says, "Jean, do you remember where the money is? I buried money under the floorboard in our bedroom." And the little boy sees the steps and runs up the steps, turns right because he knows where the bedroom is. He runs into the bedroom, points to a floorboard. They pry it up, and there's $4,000 buried under the floorboard.
Wow.
It's hard to explain or teach or coach a 3-year-old to do that. And so they consider that case verified. If they have enough facts and some stuff that could be verified, and they've got about 2,400 of those cases that researchers have found.
So you, in your research, I'm sure you've studied a lot of Raymond Moody's material.
Absolutely have read
He's
some
the
of
one
this.
that coined the term NDE, by the way. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's reincarnation is basically what we're talking about.
Correct.
You're sitting in your life today and you're going back and learning about your history throughout
Correct.
basically eternity, I guess, is if you could go back that far. You had made earlier a mention that before you took on this earthly life, were you in a spirit world before you came to this state?
Actually, yes, and I've seen part of my past life review, which is a time between lives, and I've also had the privilege of watching my father's past life review, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my father's past life review because it's very interesting. He has a lifetime where he was a slave owner or a slave trader, where he split families apart, and he chained people into the bow of his boat and transferred them across the Atlantic Ocean and ended up in Bermuda. In his very next life, he lost his wife in childbirth, and he lost a child who was abducted, just like he had split families up. In his very next life, when he was my father, which is this life, he spent the last 20 years of his life chained to a wheelchair because he got Parkinson's very, very badly. And they're trying to show me that some of those things that he did in his past life, he had to gain some understanding, compassion, empathy for in this life. And part of that is overcoming what you've done to people. And so you have to overcome that yourself. And if you do overcome, I've seen my father now a couple different times where he's visited and explained that it's all about these lessons. It's all about wanting to go over the horizon, as we call it, or back to heaven's source, God, where we all come from. It's going back to that point and returning after we've learned all our lessons.
So there's one word I don't think, and we've been talking for almost an hour now, but there's one word in all this I don't think I've heard either one of you use, and that word was brought to mind as you just gave this background, and that's the word karma. Is karma something that you put in the equation, or you don't look at it in a way of sense of karma? We
put karma in the equation, definitely.
Okay.
Karma is not exactly the way you think about it. If you can see from my father's example, he wasn't chained into a boat because he chained somebody in a boat. Life has changed in the planet. And so we don't have as many chances to enslave people now as we used to. We've all been slave owners and slaves. However, you can still be slave to a disability, slave to alcoholism, slave to. So if you were a slave owner in the past, you may fall into one of those categories in this life, because you need to learn that you are no longer in control of every part of your destiny. And so that's how karma works. It's about lessons. It's not exactly about punishment.
Well, I'm a step ahead of you because I learned that I never was in control of anything.
And we've learned some of that truth, that there's really a controlling force of nature, God, if you want to call that. If you start talking about the people who believe in a lot of metaphysical quantum physics, you start to build up all this information and you realize there's more matter than antimatter.
Mm-hmm.
There's more order than disorder. And there should be chaos in the universe, and there isn't. Because there must be some guiding force. And part of our lessons is that we get to return to that guiding, loving force, which is God.
This is Dave and Carla, and I'm going to put your books up here real quick. The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. If you've missed any part of this show that we're doing, which is going to be 2 hours, it'll be archived on Facebook as well as on our YouTube channel, Abnormal Alabama. And as you can tell from the conversation, we are not considered normal. And I think personally that's a good thing, because when I was young, I looked around, I said, if this is normal, I want no part of it. So is this your first book we're looking at?
That's the first book.
Okay. And then here's the next one. Now, this one caught my attention very strongly, because in my course of going through for my PhD and going through the history of the Bible and Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic and all that, I learned that the Bible don't even teach hell as is taught in churches.
That's right.
Correct. And this is another lesson from Isabella, which is, and some of this, Kelsey, you would agree to. The written language of any kind in Aramaic or Hebrew really didn't exist till about 1000 BC.
It was
and
right.
So biblical history is 3,000 years before that. That means we're talking quite a great phone game. These are stories told over and over and over again.
Incorrectly.
I like smart people.
Yeah. And so even if you talk about New Testament history, it's a history that's written down at least 30, 60, 70 years after the event. And not by the names on the people they give credit to.
Right.
Right. It's not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
And Mark, in the first book, it was the one that was closest to the story, but it would have been the first of the four Gospels, as they say. Yeah. And the original Hebrew language in the written form had no vowels.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was an interesting development. And my view of the Bible, and I quote the Bible a lot. My background is in the Bible. I think it's a good book to refer to.
It's a guide.
It's a Jewish book. Mm-hmm. And Gentiles never went to a Jew and said, help me understand this.
Yeah. Well, see, I'll tell you another lesson from Old Testament things, which is, we look at the 10 Commandments and they say they're a great guide. But, Deuteronomy says that women literally are possessions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so honor,
continued in the New Testament.
And it continued, yes, it says, don't covet thy neighbor's goods, house, woman, ox.
The
donkey.
hair just went up on my back.
Yes. So in a modern day setting, old Jewish history that women are possessions is certainly not acceptable.
There's so much, and the first question I had, my dad was a pastor. He put me on the pulpit when I was like 6 years old or so. Put a Bible in my hand. It was in December. My mother dressed me in a wool suit, and I was so nervous. I stood there to read this out of the Bible, and I was so nervous. I stood there reading the Bible as I peed all over myself.
Oh, on wool,
Oh.
terrible.
Yeah.
But I did not stop. I kept on. The point being is that my first question that arose as to the legitimacy of these stories was that I was in my little twin bed one night, and I'd heard these stories since birth. My dad morphed into Abraham. I morphed into Isaac. And my dad is tying me up and raising a knife to me. You know the story I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
That scared the crap out of me. It's like, what kind of God is this? And so, but at that tender age, I didn't dare go to Daddy and say, hey, Daddy, this is screwed up. You know, I wanted to live to adulthood, so I kept my mouth shut.
Yeah.
So,
We kind of try to believe, and as our experience is, that God is consistent. So God wouldn't say, thou shalt not kill, and then say, Abraham, kill your son. It's not consistent.
right. So there has to be more to it than what's on the surface there. And it goes back to the Gentiles, us, I'm not a Jew. We, around the 2nd or 3rd century, kind of took all these writings, and by the 4th century came up with what we call the Bible, and started taking this stuff literally instead of learning a moral story.
Correct. Even, and if you look back at church history, and this is in the second book, Origen, who is actually from Alexandria, Egypt, of Greek descent, he's actually the writer of almost most of the Christian Catholic doctrine at about 200 AD. Actually, in 400 AD, they excommunicate him from the church after he's already dead, because part of his teaching was that there is pre-existence of the soul and that there is transmigration or potentially a second life. And then if you start looking at some other Christian documents, you start to see things that don't quite make sense. In the Bible, Jesus says, before your life is over, I will return. Or in this lifetime, I will return. Well, it's so strange that he writes that way, because it was not written down till 70 years later.
Right.
And he's implying that this kingdom of God will come within your next lifetime.
Right.
While you're still alive. And even the book of Revelations appears to be coded in such a way that I'm not sure Nero, who wasn't persecuting the Jews, isn't the reason why Christians, yes, isn't why we start talking about an antichrist.
Yeah. Okay. I'll say one more thing. We'll kind of get off of that and go back to where your story. But I do a lot of weddings. I officiate a lot of weddings. And one of the popular scriptures that we use at weddings is 1 Corinthians 13, the attributes of love. And I remind people that before Paul wrote those attributes of love, he wrote these words. He said, if I have faith to move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And then he went on to write, out of these three, faith, hope, and love is the greatest. So I'm reminding people that listen to what Paul says there. He's saying that love is more important than faith.
Absolutely.
And that to me is the whole teaching, that if we can learn to love, then we have got it kicked right there.
True.
And I think that's the lesson in the book is the same.
And so that's why I call myself an old hippie without the hair. It's about peace and love. So now get back to your book. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
That's good. And that's part of the research that we did in the second book too. Biblically, there's Sheol or Hades,
Right.
and the other thing is the Valley of Gehenna.
Right.
And in the King James Bible, all three of those words get converted into the word hell.
Right.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And the Valley of Gehenna was really the ditch outside of Jerusalem.
Absolutely.
So we got a ditch and Sheol, which is the place of atonement. That's not necessarily a place for bad people. Or Hades, and Hades was divided as a place for good and bad people. It's not, hell is not exactly a place.
Well,
Hell is based on a pagan god named Helia.
Basically, their view of hell came from Dante's writings.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And we put all that in the second book.
Yeah.
Plus,
So that's
that's
fascinating that you've come to these conclusions because, you know, you did your homework is all I can say.
Yeah.
Isabella.
Yeah,
Isabella did your homework.
She did. She'd say, you got to look here. You've got to look this up. You've got
Research
to
this, research that. Yes. We actually did a YouTube video about hell.
Okay.
If you get onto our...
You've got a YouTube channel as well.
We don't have a channel.
Well, we do. We have a channel, but it's only got 2 videos on it.
You gotta work on that.
We'll work on it.
Yeah.
Carla,
It's on our website too.
Carla, you were saying something, and you did.
I don't remember.
Real quick, if you look at the bottom of the screen, that's your website, thegiftofpastlives.com. That's where you can learn all about these two wonderful people that are very entertaining and have a very fascinating story about their lives going back for 6,000 years. So the first thing I'll say, I think that's going to be worth reading because how many people do you get to meet that knows 16,000 years of their own history?
That's true.
Yeah. And just from the hour we've been talking, it's like this, they've done their homework. Isabella is Dave's spiritual guide.
Yep.
Carla, who's your spirit guide? Give us a little bit about your side of this story and there's your spirit guide. And I know how you worked with him and you did the secular part of putting this story together. Do you have more of a spiritual side on this story as well?
Well, my spirit guide is Elizabeth.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, it's Elizabeth. And interestingly, that if you Google the meaning of Isabella, it's a derivative of Elizabeth. And they both mean oath of God.
But you're not, you sure you're not sharing the same spirit guide?
We're not.
Sure.
We're absolutely not. I get visions of what she looks like, and Dave gets visions of what Isabella looks like. And Elizabeth actually comes to me, well, she's come to me 3 different ways. As a real young, sweet, innocent-looking girl, as an older Black woman with dreadlocks and sunglasses, and and recently, not too long ago, we were talking about Cleopatra, and she came to me with eyeliner because Cleopatra wore a lot of eyeliner, and she had her hair all dark and poofed up. But yeah, and when I get these visions, like I said, I usually draw them. And the difference between a vision and a dream to me is I can remember it and draw it like even way after the fact. With some scenes in the bar room with Ruby and JJ in the 1920s. I've done that in, I don't know, several lives. And my sister does it as well because she's actually been in a lot of our lives. So when you meditate, you open up and they're able to show you things and reach you.
Now, Dave has run across your mother in a past life and his own father in a past life.
Yes.
Have you run across any of your family or his in your past life?
Well, an interesting little story. my mother had 6 girls, but before she actually completed a pregnancy, she had 2 miscarriages. And we've been told from Isabella that those miscarriages were both Dave. So Dave actually would have been my oldest brother. And Dave's mother actually had 2 miscarriages before she completed her first pregnancy, which was Dave, and I was her 2 miscarriages. So we would have been brother and sister one way or the other.
Kevin,
Yeah.
you're wide awake over there, and I've been doing all this talking. I'm sorry. These people, to me, it's a fascinating story. Do you have any question or anything you'd like to address with them?
I was just thinking whenever I hear about past lives being talked about, I've had a dream where I was this older gentleman in the 40s. I'll go ahead and just tell about it. I've never had at least I don't know of a past life vision or dream I've ever had, but there was this one dream that's very clear in my mind, happened a couple of years ago, where I'm driving down this road. I feel like it's early morning, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's out. It's dark. But I'm driving in a truck that looks like something out of the late 40s, early 50s. I'm looking around at this small town. I have no idea if this is south, north, what part, but it's American, and it's a small town. And the buildings look like out of the late 40s, early 50s, like post World War II. I just had this post World War II feeling in my mind, and I'm feeling like I'm trying to get away from something. And when I look in the mirror, I'm not me. I'm an older man, and I'm almost like an audience member watching this play through the eyes of this old man.
That's an experience I have, much like that, Kevin.
And he gets to this intersection coming up. There's one traffic light there, old timey traffic light, and somebody's standing there in a trench coat and a fedora. And as he gets close and he's looking, the guy looks up at him, and as he starts to pass the guy pulls a gun out. He steps on the gas, and his body steps on the gas to go, but I don't get far. He's behind me, but there's a crack of a gun, shatter of glass, and a bullet goes in the back of my head, and I go forward. And the last thing I'm thinking the last thought in my mind is, so this is what it's like. And then I woke up. And it was almost like when I thought about it, I was thinking this is what it's like. Am I thinking this is what it's like to die, or what kind of question was that? But I have a lot of haunted items in my home, and I felt like, and I've always wondered, is that what the past life thing really is? Rather than maybe was it something we lived, is it maybe a spirit connecting to us, trying to show us their story? And I felt like that was one of my spirits. I've got dolls, items I've collected from investigations and other people's investigations that allegedly have spirits attached to them. I have had some activities. I know some of them at least really have something to them, but I feel like one of them may be connected to me in my sleep. I've heard that can happen sometimes.
All right. So, Kevin, I'll make a few comments. It's very likely that this is some sort of a past life experience that you're having, or like you said, it may be a past life experience of someone else.
Or you're the guy with the gun.
Or you're the guy with the gun. Yes, it could be any one of those. Because a lot of people have that kind of detail and that kind of memory when we have past life regression. And the truth is, almost the easiest memories to remember are those that are traumatic. They always show up first if you do past life regression with people. The memories that they died tragically. The other thing is, Kevin, if I can connect with somebody who's passed over, I can't say it's not possible for you to connect with somebody who has passed over, who's sharing their experience, trying to teach you something. Now, we tell people they're not supposed to try to connect with those souls that are going to return, because they have reasons to try to prepare the world that they're going to return to. So you go through some stages here. You die, you pass over, you go to the time in between or this past life review. However, you have to get back on cycle. So you actually go to what we call the pods or the dodecahedrons. It's an area where you remain watching until you come back. You contemplate some of the mistakes you've made in your past life. Those people can contact you, and even if they are in spirit form, the human mind is incredible. We save so many facts in our subconscious mind that if you see this soul on the other side waiting to return, it may not look exactly human, but you fill in the details because your mind only has 5 senses. So it fills in some of the details. And so you'll see an entity. You'll experience an entity that is on the other side, if you want to call it, or in the spiritual world. And so, Kevin, you could be experiencing someone in the spiritual world or actually experiencing someone of your own past lives.
So to simplify what you just said, Dave, it sounds like it could have been more, it could have gone either way. He could have been dealing with somebody's spirit, or he could have been having a past life experience.
Correct.
And that's something I was going to ask Kevin after that experience. Clearly, if you said it's a couple of years ago and it's still that clear in your mind,
Yes.
it seems to me that that's a lot more than just a dream.
Absolutely.
More than just a dream. Absolutely. The details are too good.
Being as partially sensitive all my life, I picked up on spirits. When I was a little bitty kid, I could see them like they were people, like solid people. I didn't know they were ghosts until somebody else would say, "No, I don't see anybody there." But as I got older, I didn't see so much as just sense it. So it didn't surprise me that one would, I've had weird dreams that I couldn't explain, that wasn't anything I'd experienced in my waking hours.
So, Kevin, after taking that dream, taking everything, because you outlined it like it just happened last night.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way you spoke of it. The question that came to my mind was, have you taken the time to research old newspaper articles or any news stories to see if something like that did transpire back in the 40s or 50s in rural Alabama or something?
No, I haven't tried to do any kind of research on that. I figured probably one of these spirits was trying to show how they had passed. And I thought about it, I just put it out of my mind and didn't do it. But I thought about doing a spirit box session here to see if somebody might come through to let me know.
From what I'm hearing from Dave and Carla, is that's how Carla connected the dots as she went back and did the secular research on the stories, that even if it was just a ghost or a spirit that you're experiencing in your sleep, there was some connection between you and that spirit to give you this story in such a very HD quality way. So it'd be interesting to know if something like that took, and that was either you or you were a voyeur in this event.
It would be
Was
it would be interesting
because I did was Alabama, Virginia.
Yeah. It would be interesting to do a past life regression
On Kevin. That would be fun.
Do a hypnosis, take him back, and try to find that life.
You're a guinea pig.
Yes.
I'm gonna be a guinea. You be the guinea pig there, Kelsey.
Oh, it's fun.
So you went through what's the people's name you went through the past life regression with? I know it's in your on your website.
Dr. Brian Weiss. He wrote a lot of the early literature on this. He's a psychiatrist who took people back to early childhood when he was in his psychiatry practice, and as he was taking them back to try to see if they had childhood problems to deal with, he had patients spontaneously go beyond childhood into a life before. And then he started doing it more and more until he had tens of thousands of patients that had had past life experiences.
We have one of our guests who is watching this has been communicating with me. She loves you guys, by the way. I think it's Michelle Somberfield. And,
Michelle, yep.
Yep. So she's got a question. Why do spirit guides change the form in which they appear to a person?
Do you want to take it, Carla? You want me?
Well, that's an easy one. First of all, they have personalities. And second of all, they want to show you something that makes you feel comfortable, you're comfortable with. And Michelle, if I'm not mistaken, she has a girlfriend that likes to appear as Marilyn Monroe. And that's somebody that they're comfortable with. So this girl believed that she was Marilyn Monroe when in fact she isn't. Her spirit guide appears as Marilyn Monroe because that's somebody that makes her feel comfortable.
That's the kind of girlfriend I want.
Yeah, that's a spirit guide you want. But they have no gender, so who knows what you're getting.
Well.
Yes.
Now, Michelle, she has something for Kevin here. Kevin, she says, go for it. Get a regression.
Mhm.
So, you know this person. They know you.
Yeah.
You must also be giving these regressions for other people now.
We do. We don't do it for a living like some people do. We've used it mostly for experience on friends and acquaintances and people that we know. We think of most of our experiences being somewhat of a gift and we're trying to share it. We really don't charge except for the room cost if we do a meditation or if we go to the senior center, they give us the room. We're just trying to make a difference for people and teach them something. So we do regression on our family and friends and people we know or people that seek us out.
So, can you do a regression in the virtual world here? Do you have to be face to face, or can we set up a private virtual meeting and put me through a regression?
I know
Technically you could, but doing past lives is a very personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, there's a way to set it up without having anybody else see it, if you know what I'm saying.
I don't mean that. I mean, it's very personal between you and the therapist, and it can be extremely emotional. Don't forget, you're carrying things that you're supposed to be healing from in this life. And often people get very emotional, very upset. Things come up that you are not aware of in this life. So to do it via Zoom or, like this, it's very impersonal. I wouldn't feel like I was helping that person. I'd want to be sitting there with them.
Right.
I do know regression therapists who do it online.
Yeah, but you feel it's better to be there to actually hold their hand and so forth.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because afterwards, somebody needs to have a discussion on what did you feel, how was it, and you can do that online. But I do know some regression therapists who do it online, but they literally try to book out 3 or 4 hours because after the session, they still need to take the person back down and discuss all the things that they went through. And that's really hard to do this way.
So it's almost like putting someone in a hypnotic state.
Absolutely.
But you have total control to open your eyes anytime you want to.
You're very lucid.
Yes,
Yeah,
very.
very lucid.
When we're not in the midst of a pandemic,
Yes.
Correct.
okay, when things open up,
Mm-hmm.
do you guys go on tour, give live lectures and that sort of thing across the country?
Well, that's part of the plan.
Our publicist would love to, but not with COVID.
Yeah, well, I know Kevin and I used to do this together.
Aw.
In the same
my
room.
office.
Yeah.
And then this, things changed, and this is a very safe way now. I'm not a kid, so I would, even though I have no health issues, except for mental and emotional.
So do we.
All of it.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't want to put anybody in danger or myself, either one. So
Right.
I take it pretty seriously.
Yeah.
But
Doing research on a lot of this, what I've discovered is real deep meditation is also a way to access your subconscious. Hypnosis is a way to access your subconscious. And for Kevin, dreams that occur between that period of time, right before you reawaken or right before you fall asleep, also reaches the same level of subconscious in the mind if you do the medical research. So there is part of your subconscious that records your past life memories, your traumas, all of those things that keep carrying with you. Part of the reason we don't remember them is that our subconscious protects us from all that trauma. But every experience that you have gets recorded in your subconscious. And so those things bring those subconscious things out, but we record them in our subconscious so that we don't necessarily have to live that experience again, and it's still protective. When you touch something that's hot, you pull back because it's recorded in your subconscious. So you don't touch the same hot thing again. You try not to jump in there and get shot by a mobster in Chicago again. So now I look out for mobsters when I'm in Chicago. You know, those kind of things.
hey, what's the matter? What's the matter your face? So, couple of questions. I'm
Sure.
sorry, I'm full of questions. But I guess that makes me a good interviewer, huh? Having
Absolutely.
questions.
Yes, we want questions.
What do you think of life somewhere else in the universe? What we would commonly refer to as aliens and that sort of thing. How does that tie in? Can you reincarnate and become a little green man on Mars? And I'm exaggerating, of course, but you get the
I
point.
understand. Our experience, and with what Isabella says, the answer is no.
Okay.
And I'm going to stick with that. And I'm going to stick with that. I think that we experience this life between lives, and it's non-worldly. And so people do experience something that where they see shapes, they fill in the details. It's out of this world experience. And that's what we call these experiences that people have that are from other planets, other times, before Earth history. Again, part of the lesson here is no one's coming from another planet to save us here. It's our responsibility to save ourselves.
I always, yeah, go ahead.
So when you think, I'll give you another example, because we have people, past life regression is not 100% science. There's a lot of fantasy that can still go on. If you do the research on it, researchers don't use past life regression as a research-based. We have some cases that you can confirm, but most of the cases they confirm are childhood cases that can't be taught or learn, other things that might happen, because it's hard to tell if it's a fantasy or the real life. There's a set of people who believe they have past lives in places like Atlantis. Well, geographically, Atlantis doesn't exist. There's no cataclysmic event that caused it to sink. Plato made up the place called Atlantis to try to teach people a lesson. And the lesson is, if science gets so far advanced and you think you're above God and nature, you're probably going to destroy yourself. So,
well, yeah.
So those kind of experiences, we ask those questions. Usually Carla asks those questions. She's the most curious and incredible woman I've ever met.
Because if God didn't want us to have a brain, he wouldn't have given it to us, right?
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if mine functions properly, but
What you been smoking there, Kelsey?
uh, I tell you what, guys, and I'm purposely, besides having all these questions, I don't want you to go too deep into your story because I want to give people a reason to buy your books. So
Yeah.
if you tell it all now, then it's like, why have the book, right?
Well, there are 7 lives in the second book that sort of explain some of the religious significance that we did, because the second book really is about trying to reconcile my Catholic beliefs with my reincarnation experience and Carla's reincarnation experience. So we tried to go out and do the research and say, how does this work? And the first book has 21 lives, and we've only really told you a couple.
So are you still in the process of discovering more lives today?
No.
No, we're expanding the lives that we found. So we start getting more incredible details. We reach out into whose parents were whose parents and what happened during those lives. We've actually documented how we died in every life. We've documented many of the people in those lives, some of the experiences in those lives. That's how we know the lessons we learned. And we keep delving into them more deeply.
So, Dave, I get the sense that you are a very caring, passionate, and emotional man.
Correct.
As pure as the driven snow.
So you're a lot nicer guy than I am.
Well, we don't know that.
I don't know that, Kelsey. I think you're a nice guy.
You know that you've seen the movie, Dr. Evil.
Yeah.
So, Kelsey, ask me the evil question.
So I would feel that as you went through these experiences of past lives, that you probably had some very highly emotionally charged experiences to where Carla's having to hug your neck and calm you down.
Oh, a couple of times.
Many times.
Yeah. So it is, I can then sense why Carla says this is best done in person.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could shed a lot of tears. You're remembering things, and I guess, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm making, based on what I'm learning here, I'm making some guesses as to how this comes together. But it seems like you're gathering a lot of information that really is helping you understand you. At the end of the day, it's all about why am I who I am? Mm-hmm. Why do I go in a certain place and have a feeling that is negative? Mm-hmm. Or why do I go to another place and have a feeling that's like, ooh, I'm at home, I'm comfortable?
Yes.
Correct. And it's interesting too, Kelsey, as we started putting all these past lives down and recording where they were and what was happening, there's a draw that we've had. Carla's actually visited the Mayan Riviera and looked at the temple that I saw in my vision, because she had been there.
Already been there. You didn't need to go again.
Well, she had been there too and drawn back to it.
Mm-hmm.
She'd been drawn back to England and to Italy when she had visited there, and to Bermuda where we had a life, because there's a draw that she still has to those areas. So a lot of times, if you have this incredible draw that you want to go to England and visit, the Tower of London, maybe you were killed in the Tower of London.
Mm-hmm.
So, just based on my own experiences in life, there are sometimes maybe you go to a social event or something and you walk in the room and there's somebody there that you don't even know them, but they make you very uneasy, very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. You want to leave. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's based on a past life experience with them, that that there maybe had a bad experience with them 500 years ago or something?
I think it's very likely. A lot of the deja vu type of experience that people have is a flashback to a past life. It's either a past experience that seems much like this one, or actually someone you've seen in a past life. And yes, they may not have been nice, or they may have been nice. Most of us has met somebody in our life where we thought, gosh, it took you 10 minutes and now you think you're best friends and you've known each other forever. Well, maybe you have.
But on the flip side, my next door neighbor, who just recently moved away, we have found him in 21 of our past lives. We've had karma with him in every one of these lives. He's been responsible for, actually in our very first life, for killing me. So we learned to stay away from him.
Yeah.
But
And it's your neighbor?
yeah, very negative. He's a very negative man. I tried really nice to be, tried really hard to be nice to him. It wasn't possible. So, it was best to just stay away from the toxicity and not create more karma.
Yeah. So that's a burden you carry.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you see him, or every time you cross paths with him, or
Yes.
whatever, it's you feel it. It's an emotion you go through.
Yes.
And it's part of the things we have to control, because we all have emotions that we don't control very well. And controlling how we react is really the only way we can control that karma.
Michelle referred to something that I would like you to define for me, and she mentions a split soul theory.
Okay. She's talking about there's a whole bunch of different theories out there on people. One of them is called twin flames. One of them is called soulmates. We believe in soulmates to some extent, but there's something that occurs after your last incarnation, not something you meet. Twin flames is this theory that when you're in heaven, you could split in half and you could go into one body and somebody could go into the other body and they're the other half of you. That's not our experience. First of all, why would God split your experience in two? Secondly is you're created completely whole the way you are. And so to say someone's the other half of you sort of implies that you're incomplete, and no person is incomplete.
So, what about through your past lives? Have you had gender change? Were you ever a woman in your past life?
I've never been a woman, and Carla's never been a man. However, we've regressed many people who have been both sexes. And that's not common, but it's certainly present often enough that that does happen. It does happen. Yeah.
And it's karmic related. If you were an abusive man in one life, maybe the next one you'll come back as a woman so that you can understand what it's like to be abused.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle said that she has been both in her
Mhm.
past
Yeah.
lives. So, very interesting. Is this something, do you think it is truly a healing process to go through this regression and to start experiencing your life? Has it enhanced your life, Dave? Do you feel more complete spiritually, or?
Absolutely. I feel incredibly complete because I sort of have a way to address life in general, as far as making loving choices, knowing that if we make mistakes, they're just mistakes. It's not a sin. We have to live both sides of all of these lessons so that we learn empathy and compassion. So when people are having a rough time in something, it's really how you react to it. You're not a poor person. It's how you react to being poor. You're not a rich person, because rich people aren't necessarily happy either. It's how you react to your situation that determines who you are, and that's how you're going to turn out in the next life. Or if you you learn all your lessons, you're not going to return at all.
It's interesting that you said what you said there, because in my life I've known more wealthy people to commit suicide than poor people.
Mhm.
Correct.
And people think money's the answer to everything.
Mm-mm.
But if I look back over my life, some of the best times I had was when I was flat broke.
That is so true.
That's right. Because when you become thankful for who you are and what you are, you don't need to change anything.
Well, Chris Christopherson wrote the words to a song that Janis Joplin made very popular, and those words were, "Freedom is nothing." How's it word again?
Freedom's
But
just
word for
another
nothing.
word for nothing left to lose. Yes.
So you got
She
no
could-
balance.
Carla could sing as that Ruby the Flapper too, just so you know.
Yeah, I get paid a lot more to not sing than I would to sing. So, Catherine, you got any questions or comments for these two lovely people here? I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Can y'all hear her? I can't hear her.
No, she's
Can you hear
breaking
me
up.
now?
I
Can't
can
hear
hear her.
You can hear me? I know of one past life I had.
I can't hear you. I don't think we can hear you.
I hear a little bit.
Can you interpret it? Interpret it for her, Kevin. I can't hear her.
No, if it's not coming through.
She said she knows of one past life that she's had.
Yeah, I got
Okay.
that part.
Okay. Wow. All right. So it is, again, the giftofpastlives.com. Okay.
Yes,
And
you can-
the two books, again, I want to get those up there real quick one more time. Where'd I do with them? I got to find them here. And I like the cover of that book. Now that I bring this back up, that brings about another question. I have not read the book at this point. I told you that up front. What's the significance of that ring?
Oh, that ring is so interesting. Within the book, in the back of the book, there is a little separate vignette about that red ruby stone, where it was first found and how it changed hands 34 lives over so many years, so many generations. I think it was 1,100 years. It changed 34 times into 34 different hands before it ended up on the finger of Ruby Donaldson in 1925, the flapper, and I own that ring now.
So that's your ring. That's a picture of the ring.
That is my ring.
That's Carla's ring.
Okay, so that, of course, jumped out when you see that book there. And, of course, I already told you what jumped out there was, hell no, reincarnation.
Yeah.
And my studies had already led me to that point. In fact, from a biblical viewpoint, I'd already come to the conclusion that you could interpret these Bible stories as telling a story of reincarnation.
Absolutely.
I
Very
agree with
good.
you, Chelsea, because if you really look at the Old Testament, what you see is a story that says, here's the Jewish or Hebrew people, they've screwed up. And then what happens? God gives them another chance. They go through another 1,000 years and they screw up again and they lose Jerusalem again. And then God gives them another chance and they return back and they rebuild the temple. Then they lose it again and 1,000 years and they come back and they rebuild the temple again. If that doesn't sound like the story of reincarnation, I don't know what is.
Well, the fascinating thing about when you view these stories in light of what we're talking about, all of a sudden it's like, there is a God of love. There's not a wrathful God. There's not a vengeful God. There's a forgiving God. You come down to where the interpretation that's credited to Jesus makes more sense.
Correct. And this was something I read by somebody else, not me, but it was, if you try to read the entire Bible, supposedly there is 8 spots where it says fear God and 365 where it says do not fear God, he is love.
Yeah, if you try to get the wrong sense of the book, and of course we can all cherry pick. In the
Correct.
Protestant version of the Bible, there's 66 books.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of words there and a lot of stories. So that's why that one book gave birth to over 30,000 different denominations.
Mhm.
Correct.
Somebody's wrong.
Yes.
And then you got Catholic background. So what do y'all have? 73, 74 books in the Catholic Bible.
Yeah, I like to say it's just the same, unless you're Mormon, who does include the Book of Enoch, or some Eastern Orthodox church that includes the Book of Enoch, because most people don't.
Yeah.
But and then of course, even in the Hell No book, we do talk about some of the Gnostic books a little bit, and some of the Christian history, trying to explain where this reincarnation sort of disappeared.
Right.
And we also talk about some of the research on reincarnation, plus some of our past lives. And we start to learn lessons that are based on, again, the 5 simple rules. And then we really learn that in war, we're on both sides, so we fight both sides of the war. So there really is no winner. We start learning things like, if reincarnation is real, not only do you leave this world to your children, if you don't take care of the planet we have now, you're going to leave this world to yourself.
Okay. Now let's get down to some technical aspects of reincarnation. So you die, and is there a period of time before you are reincarnated, or do you immediately sprout up as little Junior over here?
This is interesting. Isabella's told us that there's actually 3 days where you're going through a transition period where you are a little confused by the transition from living a physical existence to a spiritual existence. After those 3 days, you go to an area of atonement, and you actually meet 12 passed over souls who don't have to return, who lead you through an educational process of going through your past lives, trying to explain to you what you did wrong. You have to experience some of the pain you caused others, so you will learn some empathy and compassion. And then you go to a place where we wait until it's time for us to reincarnate. You have to understand, you get on sometimes off cycle with your family mates, so you may have to wait 9 months and come back right away. But if you died as a child, you might have to wait 90 years till you come back again, so that you get on cycle with some of your same family.
Okay.
Time is not really the same there. You're in God's presence to some extent, so you feel like it's comfortable, warm, nurturing.
Would you say then that time is a human construct?
Time is part of the experience of the physical plane. We do, from the very first moment that we're born, there's a time between feedings, then there's a time between going to work, there's a time to sleep. So time is a normal part of our physical plane. In the non-physical plane, time really has no meaning.
So as you were explaining the answer to my previous question, you referred to the 3 days.
That's in this world.
Okay. So interesting thing about that is, of course, if you follow the story of Jesus, he was dead for 3 days. Correct. Before he came back. And when he came back, even his followers did not recognize him. He had to show a wound in his hand and whatnot to prove that, hey, I'm not kidding, it's me. So that kind of falls in line with this reincarnation that you're talking about. But the thing that caught me was the 3 days, because, of course, there again, the Bible, the number 3 is very significant in the Bible story.
Kelsey, just because you brought that up, some people hate it when I tell them this, and some people think that it's a great example that Jesus is. We've been told that there are only 2 souls that have only had one incarnation, and the 2 souls happen to be Jesus and Muhammad. I think that's very interesting. That, at least to me, implies Jesus lived his life correctly, and that really is an example that we need to follow.
Okay. Michelle has another question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If two souls are together in many lifetimes, as yours was, and one lives their life really well, but the other has issues, like, seems like Carla was perfect and you weren't.
She's close. She's so close.
No, I think it's just the opposite.
So will both come back to help the other with their karma?
Yeah, the reasons we return is either to help our karma or to help someone else's.
Okay, so we've had all these experiences go back 6,000 years. Carla has witnessed, which is not abnormal. Men screw up a whole lot more than women.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love you.
You see, I've done a lot of weddings. I learned that if you want a happy environment, you never pick on the bride.
That's
Okay.
right.
That's right.
The bridezilla.
The point being is that I'm just using as a Dave. I'm not picking on you. I promise.
No,
like you.
I get it.
But you go through and you're stumbling. You know, it's like we're blind. We mature a lot later than women do. Blah blah blah. So she is kind of following you through all these lives, saying, "Come on, Dave. I'm going to grab. You know, you can pick up and do better this life." And so, over a course of time, Dave has come out to be the wonderful, beautiful person he is today, thanks to Isabella and to Carla.
Absolutely. That's what I think too.
And God made him that way. That had a little something to do with it.
Yeah, but he tried to run from it like most men do.
Yeah.
You know,
He
we
did
don't
okay.
Yeah.
He did okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed with both of you. And I tell you what, this has been not quite. We still have about 10 minutes. We can keep talking. But I do like to take the time to tell you I'm very impressed with you guys. I've really enjoyed the time we spent together. And I always remind people that when I thank you for your time, I mean it, because that's the only thing you ever own that you can't replace.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I love that expression. Mm-hmm.
You've given us your most valuable asset in life, and that's this time. So don't think it's not appreciated, because it is.
We probably have some connection with Catherine Marie, because Dave's mother's name was Catherine, or his grandmother's name was Catherine, and my middle name is Marie.
Guess what else?
What?
Her daughter's name is Elizabeth.
See?
There you go. I bet there is.
And we find that over and over, the same. If I could see her better and see her eyes, I can always tell if we've had a life together.
Very good.
Are they blue? Are your eyes blue?
Are they blue or bloodshot?
Are they blue? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to share this with you because it makes me very proud. But Michelle says this has been a really dynamic and fun podcast, the best I've seen so far.
Great.
So,
thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
And Michelle, I couldn't have done it by myself. Well, I could have, but it wouldn't have been near as good.
You never know. You seem like you know a few things.
Yeah. Kelsey, it's interesting. As we've gone through, we find these names follow us life after life. Mm-hmm. I've been David 3 times, I think. I've been Robert, or once in an English life, I was actually Rodebert, which is a English derivative, which is Robert. And if you look at the Hebrew, Carla's name in her first life translated into English is Carla. So we found a lot of those kind of synchronicities, whatever the word is.
Synchronicities, very good.
Yeah. And so we start seeing the names. That's why when Elizabeth, Catherine, Marie is probably there, because Elizabeth, Catherine, and Marie have been in so many lives that we've had, that I'm sure she's been there, because those names are not coincidence.
So what about Kelsey? You ever run across a Kelsey? Because my name is unique, or it used to be unique, until everybody started naming their daughters Kelsey.
Well, yes. We know some Kelseys in this life, but Kelsey's, what's the middle name?
Well, that is my middle name. My first name was William.
Well,
And,
okay.
and they never wanted to call me Billy because the last name is Graham, and they didn't want to ruin Billy Graham's reputation.
Yeah.
Well, as a former pastor, Billy Graham would have been a good name.
Yeah.
Might have been confusing.
Just a little.
Well, I had a friend that kept urging me that I needed to start promoting myself as Billy Graham because I could get by with it, but I just, my spiritual journey, as you could tell, took me on a different path. My view of the Bible changed. My view of, I tell people Jesus did not start a religion. He started a way of life.
Yes.
Absolutely.
If we would stop debating whether Jesus was real or not and start listening to the message that's attributed to him, and then we can make some changes.
Yeah. If you look at the historical documents, there's enough people besides the Bible that talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
Josephus and other historians. So I don't think we could argue that he's a historical figure.
I personally don't think it matters.
I don't think it matters.
Is what's important. I've got, you can't see it, but on my wall here, it says, "We must be the change we see in the world."
Yes.
Gandhi.
Absolutely.
And Gandhi
Yes.
also said that I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christian because they're so unlike your Christ. Outside of Kevin. Now, Kevin is like Christ.
Well, thank you. I think that's
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Kevin was pure as snow until I learned that he does smoke a cigar and he does have a shot of whiskey. And I found out he was perfect. And he actually used
Kevin,
a
I
curse
have your
word.
cigar, by the way.
I don't know what he's talking about. I'm not.
Other than that, gosh, this has been just a phenomenal 2 hours that went by just that quick. I'd really like to talk to you guys some more at some point, but
It'd be a pleasure.
I would like to. I'm going to get your books and read those.
Great.
Are they in a Kindle form or only in the paperback? Or
No, both.
They're both.
And you can order it right from our website.
Great. Kevin has. I'm sorry.
They can get it at Amazon too.
Okay. I've got about 20 books on Amazon myself. Kevin is a very prolific author, and you see myhaunteddolls.com, you kind of get an idea of what a lot of his books are about.
I understand it.
And I never feel right without giving Kevin an opportunity to do his Donald Trump thing and self-promote.
Well, you've got to check out My Haunted Dolls. It's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful website. myhauntedDolls.com, where you'll find my shop and the books I've written, included My Haunted Collection, which tells about the first items I collected and the stories behind them and what got me on this strange path. And you can learn about my early days of my experiences with the paranormal, my childhood ghost stories there in the Legends of Indian Narrows, where of course, I changed the name to protect us, but I grew up in a community out in West Jefferson that has its own ghost stories and legends. Also, if you like fiction, I've got novels based on some of my haunted items, like Patty Doll and Tammy Baby. And the last one, most recent one, Crimson, the blood painting, based on an actual haunted painting I have that came from Salem, Massachusetts, from the home of a practicing witch who passed away. And it was just so creepy, I just had to write a story based on that. But my haunted collection is going to have a sequel very soon. I've written most of it. It's called My Haunted Collection, The Dark Side, which tells about some of my darker items I've collected with very scary backgrounds, murder and things like that. And also, a couple of my books are on audiobook. Crimson, the Blood Painting, is on audiobook performed by actress Lynn Thomas, who does an amazing job of it. And then I did my own audiobook of The Legends of Indian Narrows. So you can find those on Audible and iTunes and Amazon as well. And ebook, I've got everything on ebook.
Kevin, it would be interesting to know how many of your past lives are intertwined with the stories that you've told about those dolls.
Ooh, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, well, Elizabeth is talking in my ear. So you could probably do some research there. If you could just start to meditate, I think you would open right up and be getting a lot of information.
Kevin started this thing, and he had a little bit bigger than what we'd call a garden home he was living in. And it got so full that about a year ago, he said, I've got to move. Now he's bought this big estate.
There's other reasons. I have my elderly father living with me and everything.
But he's now got acres of land and a beautiful piece of property. And it's like a museum in that house of things.
Wow.
Yeah. I've written, most of my books do not deal with anything that would be considered paranormal. I've written relationship books, books on grief and healing from loss and that sort of thing.
Nice.
But I've got one book that kind of falls in the paranormal woo-woo world, if you will, and that is Dating the Dead and Spectrophilia. And believe it or not, I used to belong to a group. I was not even asked to belong to this group. I just, all of a sudden, my picture was there and my phone number was there. And it was called the Paranormal Clergy. And we did what's called minor exorcisms and that kind of stuff. But I would get these phone calls from around the country of people that thought they were possessed or whatever. In 1 year, I had 2 incidences that came up that started this journey. Of course, I'd already known what incubus and succubus, I'm sure you've heard of before. But there was a singer-songwriter lady out of St. Louis that was in her 20s and very talented girl. And she wanted to pay me to come out to St. Louis and marry her to the ghost of Freddie Mercury. And I was getting phone calls in the middle of the night from Freddie Mercury, from Janis Joplin, from Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, jeez.
Eventually, I got her some help. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the same year, I got a call from a lady out in Denver, Colorado that was a florist, and she was a very level-headed, late 30s, early 40s, and she claimed to be married to the ghost of JFK Jr. And she had opened up her florist in what used to be a mortuary, and there was some nefarious ghost bully or whatever that had chased her ghost husband, JFK Jr., away, and she wanted me to help to get JFK Jr. back to her. I guess I did a good job because she actually sent me a check. Okay. Which was unsolicited because, like you guys, what I was doing was trying to help people through troubled times. I didn't do it for money.
Right.
Bottom line is, I was familiar with Mormonism. I studied all these religions because I've had all these questions. I reached a point where I thought, well, my dad just chose the wrong religion. And then after I went through the gamut of Christianity, I thought, well, he just totally chose the wrong thing all the way together. So I studied all this stuff. And I knew that Mormons actually baptized the dead and married for the dead and that sort of thing. And that's, of course, in this book. We have an interesting relationship with death. Humans do. In Indonesia, there's a culture there that actually digs up their dead once a year, cleans the bodies up, dresses them up, spends some time with them, reconstructs the coffin, and after they spend a few days with them, they rebury them. There's women that claim that they have married a ghost. And you may have heard some of these stories. And then it gets stranger than that, because in the book, there's also a woman that claims that she had sexual relations with Bigfoot. And from the way she told it, there was something bigger than the feet with Bigfoot. So use your imagination on that if you dare. But we've got all these interesting stories about people and their relationship with death, and some of them, even Catholicism. We make people saints in Catholicism. And we can pray people out of purgatory. So we have this distinct relationship in different cultures and religions and belief systems. That's what that book is about. So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Again, this is Dave and Carla. They are the past lives couple, and the best 2 hours I've spent in a long time. I really appreciate you guys. I'd really love to have some more time to talk to you if we can schedule another 2 hours at some point.
Okay,
We'd
great.
love it, Kelsey.
And I hope that you sell 1 million books. And better than that, I know that you will help a lot of people, because we all have baggage, and a lot of times we don't know where that baggage comes from. And I think that from the feeling I get from you guys, a lot of what you are into is to help people to understand that baggage.
Yes.
Absolutely, Kelsey.
And that way, that's the only way you can heal and grow, I think. So
Yes.
again, thank you for your time. Thank you for everybody that's listened. And a special thank you for Michelle, who has just been on top of us here all night. So I think you've got a fan club going there.
We like Michelle, so that's okay.
Well, she loves you guys. You might like her, but she loves y'all.
Oh, that's great.
And she
Yep.
says she got your books. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to getting your books as well. So everybody, we're going to say good night and peace and love, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Good night. It's a pleasure.
Good night,
David.
Kevin and Catherine.
There you go.
Have a good night.
Any closing words real
David.
quick, David?
My100dolls.com. My100dolls.com. Bye-bye.
So what about you, Dave? Any last words?
Can you guys
Just be better today, and then try to be better tomorrow.
There you go. All right, everybody, have a wonderful night. And, life is full of experiences, and it's not the challenges of life that get you, it's the way you choose to respond to those challenges. So if you need help, there are people like Dave and Carla and even Kevin. Believe it or not, Kevin. But there are people that you can talk to. There are people that will hold your hand through life and help you get to a better day. And we're all here for you. So take care, people, and we will see you soon. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Now we guys are no longer
Bye.
live, but we are still together here.
Okay.
And I just want to give you again a personal thanks, because this has
Still
been a
showing live. What'd
very
she say?
wonderful